Ladies and gentlemen, Frank Chase back with you one more time. Uh, the last video I did, we were talking about tithes and first fruits. And in fact, I gave you some things you need to know about tithes and first fruits. Now, in this particular video, as I stated, I would come back and do another short version of videos. We're going to talk about 5 tithing facts. 5 tithing facts from the scriptures that are required. And what you will notice when I give you this information is that there are no requirements to tithe money. So we're going to start by saying, I'm glad you're with me today. I'm glad people are looking at these videos and researching and checking out the information that I have discussed. And it's going to be very important that even though many people might disagree with my thesis and with my book, Kleptomaniac, Who's Really Robbing God Anyway, disagrees with the modern version of the tithe teaching. So basically, in order to make that stand, you have to present your facts. You have to present your evidence. You have to present your information. And that's what I'm going to do in this short video. Is I'm going to present 5 facts about God's tithing requirement throughout the scripture. And we're going to start in the Old Testament because that's where it began. And like I did before, the first tithing reference is started in Leviticus. And then we're going to go in and we're going to talk about that for a minute. And we're going to come back and we're going to begin this study. But I want you to get your pens and pencils out and get ready for some new information. We are back, ladies and gentlemen. Dr. Frank Chase here with you again. So let's jump right into these 5 tithing facts. Now, I'm going to first start off with letting you know that if you didn't know, there was more than one tithe in Israel. Now, I'm not going to get into the mechanics of all of the differences of these tithes, because that's getting down into the weeds, and you can get into those weeds as you discover and read my book, Kleptomaniac, Who's Really Robbing God Anyway. And by the way, if you want to get some detail and read a lot of information, you can go to my blog at https://tithenomore.com. That's tithenomore.com. You're going to have to use the S on the beginning of the website link. So most people don't even know that Israel had more than one tithe. In fact, they had 3. And so I'm going to list them here, and then I'm going to give you some verses as I go along in this today, and you're going to find out that what you've been told and what's being practiced today is totally different than what's in the Bible. Okay. Now, the first tithe that was in Israel the first tithe was called the Levitical tithe. That tithe and all those tithes were paid to the Levites. No one else is authorized to collect tithes in the Bible except for Levites. You had to be from the tribe of Levi. The tithe basically was an inheritance by blood because you had to be a Levite. Okay, the second tithe, or what some people call the festival tithe, was another tithe in Israel that was paid to the Levites. And not only did the Levites paid to the Levites, this tithe was shared with everybody else. And then we had what we call the poor tithe, or some call the third year tithe. And when I come back, I'm going to get into a little bit more detail about this as we go through. So now you know that in the Old Testament, there was a Levitical tithe, there was a second tithe or festival tithe, and then there was a poor tithe or third year tithe. Now, you got to start thinking critically again and ask yourself a question. Well, if Israel had that many different types of tithes, why is the church requesting you to pay one type of tithe, which is totally not in the scripture anyway? But just food for thought. We'll be right back. We are back again, so let's jump right into this. Okay, another fact here is that there was a 3-year festival tithes. 3 festival tithes were practiced during the year. Now, most people don't know this, and if you don't study the different type of festivals and feasts that Israel celebrated, and some of them still celebrate these feasts today, but they were all centered around the tithe. And so the first festival tithe, because it was 3 festivals during the year, so you heard me mention that there was a festival tithe, but there were 3 festivals during the year. So they actually had 3 festivals, and each one of those festivals were surrounded by tithing. So, and the festival tithes were eaten during the festival. So where these people come in with money and cash and duckies and greenbacks, that's not in the Bible, ladies and gentlemen. So you had the Feast of Passover. And we all know about the Passover and what happened in the 10 Commandments and all of that, and Israel having the blood over the post. We have the Feast of Pentecost. And we know about Pentecost in the book of Acts and what happened there at Pentecost. And then we had the Feast of Tabernacles. Feast of Tabernacles. And that is where this was all surrounding tithing. The Feast of Pentecost, the Feast of Tabernacles, and the Feast of Passover. All of these celebrations you can read in Exodus 23, 14 through 17, and Deuteronomy 16, 16. And yes, whether you believe it or not, ladies and gentlemen, what I have just told you is that you can eat your tithe. Now, I know you probably heard many people say you can't eat your tithe, but that's exactly what they were doing. They were eating their tithe. And so you can check out also Deuteronomy's chapter 12 and chapter 14 dealing with tithes and these festivals. And so, once again, ladies and gentlemen, I'm pointing out these small facts and requirements. And in none of those verses that you will read, because I'm not going to read them all, I want to make a short video. When you read them, you will discover not one dime, not one greenback, not one Benjamin is being paid in the form of cash. So let that sit on your thoughts for a little bit. We'll be right back. We are back one more time to finish off this little study here. And we're going to go into one verse here because I need you to understand that the tithe comes from the land. And now I'm going to read from the Jewish Bible, which makes it very clear where the tithe comes from. So put your wallets back in your pocket, put your purses back away, and put your money where it belongs, giving it from your heart. So let's look at Leviticus 27:32 rather. Let's start at verse 30. All the 10th given from the land. Where was the 10th? The tithe? The tithe means 10th. 10th part of the land, not 10th part of cash. In the Jewish Bible, it says, all the 10th given from the land, and listen to this, whether from planted seed or fruit from trees, belongs to Adonai, it is holy to Adonai. If someone wants to redeem any of his 10th, he must add to it 1/5. So we know the tithe is a 10th part from what comes from the land. Verse 32, all the 10th from the herd Okay, here we go again. All the tenth from the herd or the flock, whatsoever passes under the shepherd's crook, the 10th one shall be holy to Adonai. Now, that is clear. But if it's still not clear to you, the word land in Hebrew is aretz. Aretz. The Hebrew word aretz stands for land. It is translated earth, the soil, the ground. And so, what was God saying here in Leviticus? He was telling them to bring a tithe from the soil, bring a tithe from the land, not from your wallet, not from your pocketbook, not from your purses, a tithe from the land. And that's what it means. And so the next time somebody tells you that you have to bring 10th of your income as a joke because you really can't tithe today, as a joke, or maybe to get the point across, if you are a farmer here in the U.S., go out to your garden, go out to where your fields are and bring in a bushel of tomatoes, a bushel of grain, wheat, and bring it to the church house and says, here's my tithe, pastor, according to the scripture. But we know basically that no tithe is required today because the temple was destroyed in AD 70. So we're going to come back and I'm going to give you a little bit more information and you're going to be even more shocked about what's going on with this tithe thing. We'll be right back, if you will. We are back. So here's another fact. Here is another fact. Ladies and gentlemen, the Levitical tithe was only for the Levites. And in my video yesterday when I was talking about first fruits, the first fruits went to the high priest, but the high priests were also Levites. So 1/10 of the tithe, according to Leviticus 27:30-33, and Numbers, check out Numbers 18:25-32. Some of those tithe contents were fruits, livestock, grain, produce. Simple, y'all. Things that you eat. That's where the tithe came from. Now, who paid the tithe? That is the $64,000 question. Well, for some people, it's really an unknown answer for many people. Well, there were 12 tribes in Israel, and 11 of those tribes were living in farming communities. And yes, they did have money too. So let's get that point straight. They did have money. But the 11 other tribes of Israel paid the tithe to the tribe of Levi, their Levites who were serving in the temple. Now, there's another point I want to make about this because it's very, very important. The Levites the farmers paid the tithe to the Levites. The Levites, and this is all in my book, ladies and gentlemen, you can read all the minute details and information. The 11 tribes paid the tithe to the Levites, but the Levites had to turn around and give a tithe of the tithe, a 10th of the 10th, to the high priest. Did you know that, ladies and gentlemen? The Levites even had to pay a tithe of the tithe. It was a 10th of the 10th. It was not 10%, a 10th of the 10th, or a tithe of the tithe. If you want to break it down in numbers, which you really can't because we're talking about food items here, it was 1%. A 10th of a 10th is 1%. So the Levites never tithed 10% to the high priest. So let's get that straight. And when we come back, I'm going to share one more thing about these tithing requirements and these facts. And that should get you on the road to discovering what the true tithe is in Israel and not what's in your wallet, if you will. We'll be right back. Okay, we are back. So I want to make some final thoughts and some final facts about the tithe, and you will probably need to research it. And because now I'll have to give you this. All theologians disagree on some of the minute details about the tithe and all different things. There are some minute details, in the weeds type of details. But we know generally overall that the tithe is not money. But the minute details can be discussed and argued, I guess, if you will. So, but there is one more thing that happened in the tithe in Israel. There was a third year tithe. Remember, I discussed this earlier. There was going to be a third year tithe. Now, who was this third year tithe for? It was for everyone else who was considered to be poor. Every third year tithe was given to the poor in Israel. It included the Levites. Yes, the Levites even got some of the third year tithe. The third year tithe was given to strangers. The third year tithe was given to the fatherless and widows to eat. Again, it was eating, ladies and gentlemen, eating. It was not cash. The third year tithe was given to Levites, strangers, the fatherless, widows to eat. Those that were hungry, those that didn't have anything. Tithing was God's system to prevent haves and have-nots. That's what the tithing system in Israel was for. It was to prevent a have and have-not system. And it appears to me that God was trying to take care of all of society, those that had and those that didn't have, by instituting a tithing system that would be beneficial to everyone. And then every seventh year, ladies and gentlemen. Now, here's one thing that never happens in the modern version and the corrupted version of the tithe system, monetary tithe system. Every seventh year in Israel, tithing was ceased. That's right. No tithing in the seventh year. The reason for being, it was to let the land rest and recuperate and rejuvenate. As I said, the land needed rest from farming. And so every seventh year, there was no tithing. So you would probably ask a question like, well, if that's the case, where would they get their food from in the seventh year? Well, according to the scripture, God said he would make the tithe in the previous year so abundant, there would be no need to farm in the seventh year because the abundance would be so much. And that's where we hear in this Leviticus that he will pour out blessings that they will not have room to receive. The crops would grow, the cattle would be so much, the crops would grow so much, they would have enough to last for a whole year until the land was allowed to be farmed again. So, ladies and gentlemen, don't believe the hype. Don't believe the hype. My book has all the details about this. So if you're really interested in getting down and dirty into the tithe system in Israel, get my book, Kleptomaniac, Who's Really Robbing God Anyway? It's all everywhere where books are sold. You can get it from Book Baby. You can get it from Amazon. You can even get a signed copy from me. So thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for taking your time listening, if you will. And we'll be back with another video soon. Take care. Be blessed.